I was kind of like a science only person. I was like, there's no need for God. We have evolution, we have the Big Bang, we understand how things are made. But when you actually look at the technicalities and intricacies of things, it makes you believe in God more.
I know you mentioned that you specifically wanted to discuss faith as a scientist.
Yeah.
And science and faith are often presented publicly as opposites. What does that relationship actually look like for you personally?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about it because, it's something that when I was a kid, everything is presented as opposing, I don't know if you've heard of these new atheist people like Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens. A lot of them argue from a naturalist perspective, right? That if you are a rational person who understands science, you cannot accept anything that is opposing. So these new atheist people would rely on a lot of scientific arguments like, oh, evolution, oh, Big Bang, etc., etc. People don't realize the Big Bang idea was postulated by a Catholic priest. Very verifiable. If you check who first came up with the idea of the Big Bang, he was a Catholic priest. I don't know his first name, but it was Lemaitre. Not to say that means they should be automatically trusted, but not everything is in opposition, And, I wasn't always religious. I'm an Orthodox Christian, I was baptized in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Actually, the oldest church, we believe, that exists. And I didn't always believe in God. But I went for this internship at Oxford University. I was very surprised because a lot of it was a group of us from around the country. And there was this girl who was also from America, who was coming to us from America. And I was surprised that people there believing in God. I was like, oh, there was this Scottish girl. She was a Church of Scotland. There's this Irish guy. He's Catholic. There's this Ethiopian girl. She's Ethiopian Orthodox. So I was like, wow, maybe there's some validity to, people who believe in God and believe like are scientists, So that's when I started exploring. And, I kind of had in my head that atheism wasn't really a very defensible position for various different reasons, Like it was hard for me to defend, I should say. And when I would see people arguing about it, I couldn't really understand their defenses either. So I was like, okay, there has to be something. So, there was Islam, there was Judaism, there was Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity. And, I did a lot of investigation. And, there's very little conflict. People try and present it as conflict because it comes from the idea that religion is a man-made story, or they don't necessarily know how things are interpreted. When you look at Genesis, for example, like there's some Christians who think that the earth is 6,000 years old, like literally. So when you ask them about dinosaurs and ancient civilizations and all these things, it sounds a bit crazy, There's a lot of chaos on both ends. There's atheists who have good arguments and don't have Christians. There's Muslims who have all sorts of arguments. But for me, I really don't think that there's a conflict between, let me say specifically Christianity and science, And I think even science would agree that there are things that we'll probably never be able to understand, even from a scientific perspective,
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that just because something may never be understood doesn't mean it's necessarily false. There's a lot of very good Christians who are also very good scientists and vice versa, I think it's more of a new age thing where people think that the two have to be opposed, but that's not necessarily the case. Yeah.
You can keep your ideas and you can keep yours. It doesn't have to be we have to butt heads. I have to prove you wrong necessarily.
Yeah. And if you look at it, actually, it seems more like a cultural thing, like, for example, in Ethiopia, I've been to Ethiopia many times. There's this actually famous Ethiopian astronomer. His name's Dr. Rodas. I think he's a deacon in the church, and he's also a very prominent. He's like the Neil deGrasse Tyson of Ethiopia,
Oh, yeah.
So, there's huge voices from both ends of Christianity and science, and you can have a very normal relationship between the two. They're not mutually exclusive. Yeah.
I see the polarization of you're right or you're wrong. And I wouldn't have expected, like you said, when you met your colleagues that were also religious and studying astrophysics or science. So, and I know you spoke about it a little bit, but how specifically did starting to study, how did it strengthen your faith or challenge it?
That's a good question, because even me, I was kind of like a science only person. I was like, there's no need for God. We have evolution, we have the Big Bang, we understand how things are made. But when you actually look at the technicalities and intricacies of things, it makes you believe in God more. You know, even me, when I think about something coming from nothing, you know, that for me, that doesn't really test my faith. It's more something that strengthens it, you know, because these are things that, according to all known current laws, all ancient laws and future laws of physics, it should be impossible, you know, or even the origin of life. I don't think there's anything scientific that's really tested my faith since I've been a Christian, or even since I've been looking into it. Because, you know, I accept a lot of things. You know, I accept the Big Bang, and I accept so many aspects of science. I'm an astrophysicist, you know. I can't be denying science and good at my job at the same time. But you can believe in God, and then you can also be good at your job at the same time. So yeah, I think for me, it was just seeing the fact that there were other Christians who are scientists too, which kind of like planted the seed in my head.
Has there ever been a specific idea or a moment of reconsideration?
The thing is, for me, when I was looking into Christianity, I was confused. I didn't grow up as a Christian, right? So it's kind of like science. You know, just because a scientist says something doesn't mean it's true. You know what I mean? So just because a Christian says something doesn't mean it's true. So initially I was looking at different churches, you know, Church of England, Catholic, Eastern Orthodox. And I guess I had doubt when I was looking at each of these things, because each of them, from my perspective and from my reading of history, had things wrong with them. So when I'd hear, like in the Church of England, for example, you know, some of the things they teach about, you know, Jesus or salvation or science and all these things, I was like, nah, this is not for me. And I was in a state of limbo, you know, for maybe 6 months, because, you know, I'd learned about the Catholics. I'm like, So, you know, I think it kind of discouraged me from that church, but not from God, if that makes sense. Because, you know, I didn't think God was exclusive to these different institutions. But when I found the Oriental Orthodox Church, which the Ethiopian Orthodox Church is a part of, I mean, it sealed the deal for me. You know, every doubt I had was cleared. All the questions were answerable and everything. And, you know, I have to give a lot of credit to my teachers. I had a lot of good teachers, you know, encouraged. You know, they kind of knew the mindset I was coming from. So they encouraged a lot of questions and criticism and all these type of things, which is good. So after I found that, it was peaceful. I don't have any doubts.